Welcome to the next episode of Noise to Music, where we take the noise in our life and we turn it into wonderful, beautiful, melodic music. This episode specifically deals with this line and this idea very much because we're going to talk about the fact that essentially the world and by default our lives, our independent lives, lend itself to chaos. Okay, there are numerous factors within the world itself. There's experiencing major upheaval, and a lot more now than it used to be in history. And one of the main reasons is because the world has become such a small place that everyone's kind of connected, influenced, has what to say, so on and so forth by everyone else. A financial crisis that happens in one place, and affects the entire world. Wars and so on and so. Opinions, can affect millions and billions. With in a very rapid way. Information is just spread out so much, so that lends itself to a world that's experiencing a lot of instability. Now, by default, since this is the world that we live in as an independent, as a person, we experience the same thing, right? Our lives, same thing, right? Our lives have a tendency, as much as we would like them not to be that way, to be unpredictable. Our human nature also lends itself to that way, to that unpredictability. We're susceptible to mood swings, to health, financial situations, what country you live, if you're moving, and also the cycle of life is as such. Person's born, he's an adolescent, he's a teenager. Those are all new experiences in your life. You've never been a teenager before. You start dating seriously. There's always a first time to that. Then the marriage. You're building this world with this opposite gender was completely different to you in every other aspect. Children, there's this little being that's looks small. How does that fit in? What does that work in? Again, a new atmosphere, grandchildren, and so on. You get the point. The world is lends itself towards chaos, and our lives lends itself towards chaos and instability. The question is essentially, how do we deal with that? What's our take on it? How do we approach such a situation where both the world, many times the community, the family structure, and all these things need to be harnessed? Because if we want to get somewhere, we need to have some type of system. We need to have some type of understanding to be able to create positivity and strength, even in moments of chaos, times of chaos. And I'd like to give it, a parable that since life constantly has surprises, and things happen, whether we plan them or not, and mostly unplanned, take a different direction, jobs and so on and so forth. So we need to create what I would like to call a wave of positivity. Why do I call it a wave? I have a lot of friends that surf, and really surfing. Let's call it fanatics. 365 days a year they're ready to surf. Sun, snow, doesn't matter what type of weather or location. And one of the things is, it's a whole science how to catch the wave and when and where and so on. Once you catch it, though, it carries you all the way to the shore. Meaning, irrelevant of what else is going on, the wave will carry you. And that's what we need to do. We need to create a wave of positivity. We need to create a cycle of structure that will carry us through the unstable times. So if I was to kind of draw a line of our life, I wouldn't want it to be zigzagging up and down because that's very extreme. I also don't want to be going in circles. What I wanted to do is I wanted to slowly be rising on a constant basis. You're riding the wave, but then all of a sudden there's a dip. There's something that goes on. Maybe the engagement breaks off. Maybe, something to that extent. But since you're riding a wave, that wave won't let the person drop too far down. It'll pick them up and they'll continue in the upward motion sooner than if not. Rav Nachman Breslov says, and we've said this numerous times, there's no sin to be depressed, but depression brings the person to every sin in the world. What does that mean? Depression is like the mono of spirituality. Mono is not a specific illness. It kind of shuts down the entire system where it doesn't let the person, be productive or active in any form. So when, when the Yetzer Hara, when our system wants to be shut down in totality, whether it's prayer or meditating or being a good person or respecting others and, being productive at work, if a person's depressed, what that does is just shuts down the whole system, shuts down the entirety of it, right? The Yetzer Hara, the forces of negativity, they don't have to work on every single part of our life. They just bring a person towards depression, and then everything goes wrong. So what we want to do is we want to create a wave of positivity, some type of cycle that will allow us, that'll kind of hold us in those moments of down, not let the person drop too much, pick them up, and then continue. Because a life without challenges is not normal. That doesn't exist. That is not realistic. It's impossible. Never occurred to anyone, any nation, any person, anything. But if we have that strength of character, we have that momentum, we have that movement, we have that wave, as I'm calling it in today's class, then that wave independently, even if you're not doing anything about it, you're not even aware of it, will carry you because of the fact that there's momentum going. Okay? Now, from a Torah perspective, the same is true. We see this whole idea that, God creates the world, and he creates Adam Arishon, he creates Adam, and Adam sins on the first, he was created on a Friday. Our sages tell us he was created on a Friday, he sinned on a Friday, and he was kicked out of Gan Eden on a Friday. Okay? So seemingly, there starts the world of chaos. 10 generations later, it still hasn't been fixed. Noach pops onto the scene, and the whole world needs to be recalibrated. The whole world needs to be destroyed, except for Noah and his ark. So it seems like this aspect of irregularity, of chaos, of failure is built into the DNA of the world. From the beginning of time, so to speak, it's already there. You see it in the first story. So we need to know that, that's the system. On this point, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, he's a commentary on Bereshit, on Genesis. He speaks about, he lived from 1808 till 1888, and he was a very prominent 19th century philosopher, wrote a commentary on the Chumash as well, and kind of started in the let's call it the Orthodox movement in Judaism, very big force within that, one of the leaders. And he actually asks a question, pertaining to what we're discussing. He says, I don't understand. Why does the Torah have to go and spend so much time saying how God created the world, the first day, the second day, the third day? What's the difference? At the end of the day, he created the world. At the end of the day, not he created the world. At the end of the day, he controls the world. So since he controls the world, what's the difference if he created it or not? I'll give you a parable to it. Somebody buys a house. He bought a house. You're in his house. It's his. He controls it. You have to listen to his rules. You don't like it, leave his house. Right? He doesn't have to have had created it in order for you to follow the rules. Right? So Rav Hirsch says that essentially when the Torah expands on this idea that God created the world from scratch, Rav Hirsch is saying God's trying to tell us, hey, what you see in front of you is not a plan B. What you see happening to you is not a plan B. I wanted it to be this way. I had all of the recipe. I had all the ingredients to create and did create the world exactly as I wanted. You might not understand it. And many, many times it's very, it's very not understandable. It's not clear. However, we still have to hold on to this point that everything we see in our world is created on purpose, is given a direction because God wanted it to be that way. Even this aspect, and we're going to get into that in these classes, even this aspect of the world being a not clear place, being a confusing place in many times, in many instances, is on purpose. Okay, we all know that adversity is essentially what makes us better. All right, but we need to develop the tools of how to deal with it. We can't just let it happen. If a person doesn't have a direction, doesn't have a game plan, if he's not prone, doesn't have the skills to swim against the current, the danger in that is that life will just take you wherever life decides. Wherever life decides, you'll never be the person you need. Wherever life decides, you'll never be the person you need to be because you're not strong enough to be able to swim against the current, to be the person that you need to be. I'm not talking about going against community or family and all that. I'm just talking about in terms of yourself. If we're not trained in stability and consistency and creating a wave that'll carry us even in moments of challenge, then we will fail. And life will just take us wherever it wants us to go. And that is not done, in the right way. So there's a system to this. Now, Mesilat Yesharim was written by Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto in the 18th century. He was a philosopher, an Italian Jewish philosopher, a mystic, a Kabbalist. He wrote the book Pathways of the Just, and that's one of the most well-known works in Jewish ethics. And he discusses, in the first 3 sections of it, kind of like a game plan. First one is called, and I'll say it in Hebrew, it's Chovat Ha'adam Be'olamo, man's purpose in this world. It's about identifying. First, and we're going to need to discuss that. You need to identify your goals. You need to identify your direction. We need to have a game plan. Right? What is it that you need to work on? If we don't know what it is we need to work on, if we don't have in our mind, in our thoughts, in our daily life, something, an attribute, a character, a situation that we're actively trying to become better in, and we're just trying to quote unquote be good people or do the right thing, that changes from second to second. So the first thing is really identifying. The second step is removal, because you can identify what it is that you need to do, but you have to clean out, so to speak, the negative energy, the negative forces that are slowing you down. It's like swimming with a backpack of bricks. You want to swim to the other side, but you're carrying bricks. It's going to slow you down. It hurts the person. You could be eating very, very healthy, but if you're eating things that are aggressively not healthy, dangerous for your health, the person's still going to get a stomachache, right? And that obviously is not enough because you've identified, you've removed, but you also have to be proactive, meaning we have to start doing the right thing that pertains to us. And we'll explain today, we'll get a little bit into the idea of identifying, okay? But the overview is identify, remove, be proactive. What do I mean by identify? Identify means you have to make sure, Stephen Covey, in his wonderful book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he says that, a person's going up and down the ladder, taking something to a shelf on top of the room, and he's lifting boxes and it's going up. He's really working really hard, only to discover that his ladder is up against the wrong wall. So all the effort that he's doing is meaningless. He has to make sure that his ladder is up against the right wall and he's taking things up to the right shelf. Same thing. You could be working hard. You could be hustling. You could be in the grind. You could be, really putting your effort in and so on and so forth. But if your ladder is not up against the right wall, if you're not working on things that pertain to you specifically to make you a better person, to eradicate things that are challenges specifically to you. What's a challenge to you is not a challenge to someone else. Even in the same family, you could have one situation that comes up and every person in the family is affected in a different way, as we see by Yosef, right? He comes down to the brothers. Yaakov has his test. The brothers have their own test. Yosef has his test. Reuven has his test. In the storyline of Joseph and the brothers, each one has his own goal, his own challenge, the own thing that they need to work on. Some it's ego, some it's patience, some it's jealousy, some it's control. Everyone has their own job. So is your ladder, and that's the idea of identifying, is your ladder up against the right wall? So today we spoke about this process of identify, remove, and be proactive. We started touching a little bit about the idea of the need to identify. And identifying gives us the goal of establishing your moral compass. Okay? You have to go and to your inner child, that place that, subconsciously, so to speak, gives you direction. In fact, he starts, Messiah Sharim says, "Ma chovat ha'adam be'olamo." What is man's duty? Translated in English, "Ma chovat ha'adam be'olamo." What is man's duty in his world? In whose world? His world is translated as in your specific world, meaning you have your own world with God. You have your own uniqueness. You have your own specific relationship with God that you need to figure out how to calibrate. The Chachamim say, our sages say, Keshem shepartzufem shonim, just like the faces are different, everybody's face is different, so too is your character different. You have your own unique relationship with God. You need to figure it out. You need to identify it so you know what God wants you to work on. And we don't have to worry about discovering it because He sends us the bill straight. You get a personalized, workout plan regimen. It's called life. And if we learn to identify ourselves, we learn to identify, for example, our weaknesses, we learn to identify our strengths. Am I patient? Am I not? Do I have a tendency to be arrogant? Do I not? Do I get upset fast? Do I not get upset enough? Am I proactive? Am I lazy? You identify yourself, then you can translate it in the right way. But God's going to send you a situation. The question is, will you see, what it is He wants from you? Is your ladder up against the right wall? Are we just following the herd in terms of what we should be working on? Now, there are two predicaments, and they're essentially opposites that help us identify that we need to train ourselves to identify our tasks at hand. Okay, one is times of noise, and one is times of silence. Okay, so bringing from Parshat Lech Lecha, we'll see, and there's numerous different examples of this, of where God specifically and on purpose puts us in situations where our life is surrounded by noise. All right, God tells Avraham Avinu, He tells him, okay, go from your land, go from your place of birth, from your household, to the land I will show you. So, okay, the land you will show me, no problem. Let's just pick the scene. Avraham Avinu is home, and he says to Sarah, hey, guess what? We're heading out. Okay, God said we should go. No problem, I love it. What should I pack? Should I pack my snow gear and, some heavy socks, maybe a sweater, big coat, some gloves? Am I taking a bathing suit and sunscreen and my surfboard? No worries. It's great. Where are we going? To which Abraham says, I don't know. He's going to show me. What do you mean you don't know? He's God. God knows where He wants you to go. So why doesn't He tell you? The answer is God places us in situations of confusion, of lack of clarity, of noise, and it's one of the places we have to learn how to find our exact goal and how we should react. God's waiting to see how will you react in the world that is intentionally difficult. Setbacks, challenges, and failure, they're part of the plan. As we said by Rav Hirsch, earlier on, that essentially God created this world, He had all the ingredients in front of Him. And He chose this world as it is. Even the story of Adam and Noach and all that failure was part of the plan. All right, so that's the world of noise. Now, this pertains even more so to our world today with the world of social media. The companies spend millions and millions of dollars to trap our brains, to lead us on to binging, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or Netflix. There's always a next episode, exactly what would entice you to keep going. And not only that, once you start watching or following a certain path, they send you more. If you're more right wing, they'll send you more right wing things. More left wing, they'll just feeding you, just keeping you're influencing your opinion. I don't have to go over this so much because everyone knows it. Everyone knows that we're addicted to our phones. We're addicted to social media. It takes away so much of our valuable time. I've been teaching for over 2 decades, and I don't fight it in class. I don't fight it because it's not a war you could fight. I tell the students, hey, I'm going to let you keep the phone on your desk, and I'm gonna help you be able to conquer it. You have to learn how to beat this thing. All right, but this world of noise, we kind of constantly are immersed in it. In my opinion, I don't think we need any of these social media things on our phone. You want to be in touch? No problem. TikTok or Instagram or whatnot. Have it on your computer. Check it once a day. Why do you need access to it every second of the day? Why does your brain have to be infiltrated? And I'll tell you more than that. I was giving a class and I said, who here can go to the park across the street, just have a cup of coffee, sit on the bench with yourself, just relax? And everybody was like, what? And do what? And that's so weird. People are not comfortable with themselves. You just can't be alone with yourself. You don't even know what to do. You don't know how to handle it. So if you can't be alone with you, if you're not interesting for yourself, how are you going to be interesting for a spouse? How are you going to be able to be of interest and for someone else, right? We're used to the world of noise. We always have to be doing something. So in this world, we have to train ourselves. Like we always say, our brain is a muscle. And in that world, we have to learn how to be able to think properly, to identify the noise in our life, be able to react in the proper way. Next class coming forward, we'll be talking about the other aspect, which is, creating times of silence and the validity of that. Hope you enjoy this class.